I've been living with Nat. I've been staying at hers because she lives a lot closer to work.
If it's so platonic and you're just friends, why would you have to lie to me about it and tell me you're living with your parents?
I think that she has a financial hold on you that's making you feel some sort of way.
No, I don't. That offends me.
You won't believe what just dropped in Elise and Joshua's story. Imagine thinking you know someone inside out for months, sharing laughter, late night calls, and promises about the future, only to walk into a truth so messy it flips everything upside down. Elise just discovered that Joshua, the man she trusted with her heart, has been living with another woman this whole time now. Not a casual friend she visits once in a while, but someone sharing a living space. Someone in close proximity while she was under the impression he was independent, keeping his life transparent. The moment Elise learns this, the air practically changes around her. Confusion hits first, because it's hard to process how a person you believed in could hide something so fundamental. Then comes the sting of betrayal. How could he have said nothing? How could all the months of trust and planning and dreams have been punctuated by a secret this huge? Her optimism, which fueled her excitement for this in-person meeting, now begins to wobble, teetering between disbelief and the need for answers. Welcome to TLC Drama Live, where we break down every jaw-dropping twist and secret. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and let us know what you think in the comments, because this one is going to spark some serious debate. Elise's mind is racing, piecing together clues she hadn't even realized were there. Every little behavior, every time Joshua conveniently forgot a detail, suddenly feels suspicious. She wants to believe in him. She wants to trust the man who nursed her when she was sick, who made her breakfast in bed, who seemed to care in ways that felt rare and precious. But now, all of that warmth is tangled with doubt. And what makes this moment even more explosive is timing. This revelation didn't come before intimacy or bonding, it comes after the closeness escalated. The trust she placed in him has been tested, and now every smile, every gentle touch, every sweet gesture carries a shadow of question. The tension isn't just in her reaction, it's in the story that's unfolding in front of the audience. We, as witnesses, feel a rush of curiosity, urgency, and shock. What else is Joshua hiding? If this basic truth about his living situation was concealed, what other surprises might be lurking behind the charm and caring? Elise's eyes dart, scanning for answers, trying to read him, trying to measure how much is left unsaid. It's the kind of moment where time stretches, where every pause, every hesitation, every slight smile is analyzed not only by her, but by every viewer watching along. Her heart wants to hope, but her mind is buzzing with warning signs. At the same time, there's a strange mix of empathy and frustration. Elise is human. Feeling shocked, betrayed, and even a little manipulated is completely natural. And yet, part of her is still trying to rationalize, to see if there's a reason, a context, a plausible explanation for why Joshua didn't just say the truth. Was it fear of her reaction? Was it careless oversight? Or was it something deeper? A pattern of avoiding transparency that could hint at future issues. The stakes are high. This isn't just a small fib or a white lie. This is about the foundation of trust. And in a relationship already built on long-distance communication, delayed honesty, and assumed understanding, the consequences of this revelation are amplified. Watching Elise navigate these first few seconds after learning the truth is electric. There's an almost tangible hesitation. The kind of pause that makes you lean in closer, because you know a storm is about to hit. Every glance, every question she forms but doesn't yet voice, hints at the unraveling tension that will define their interaction. The camera doesn't need to dramatize anything because reality itself is loaded with suspense. Every viewer instantly starts predicting, will she explode? Will she confront him calmly? Will Joshua crumble under her questioning or maintain a composed fade? The drama is layered, compelling, and relentless, and it all starts with this single shocking revelation. Her emotions aren't linear, trust and suspicion collide, curiosity battles disbelief, and that internal struggle makes her reaction feel raw, relatable, and impossible to ignore. And as the audience, you're drawn into the intensity because the questions don't end here. What was Joshua thinking keeping this from her? How long has Nat been part of his daily life? Was she aware Elise was visiting, or did he plan to reveal it at a strategically inconvenient moment? And most importantly, how will Elise process this moving forward? Every second, the tension rises, the stakes grow, and the story pulls you deeper. The emotional hook is complete, you feel Elise's shock, the betrayal stings through the screen, and you're desperate to know how this tangled web of secrecy and intimacy will unfold. This is where TLC Drama Live steps in, analyzing every glance, every hesitation, and every behavioral cue with you, making sure you catch what matters while asking the questions that keep the story alive in your mind. Don't forget to comment below with your take. Would you forgive this level of secrecy, or would it have ended things immediately? Because the drama isn't just theirs. Now it's yours to experience, dissect, and debate. And if you think this is already intense, hold on. Because the layers of secrets and emotional stakes are only getting thicker from here. Elise can't help but feel the pull toward Joshua, even as her mind is buzzing with questions. From the moment she landed, there was an undeniable spark between them. A physical chemistry that seemed to light up every room they shared. She remembered the nights of texts and video calls, imagining the connection growing stronger, imagining what it would be like to finally be in the same place. And now, reality had delivered, almost too perfectly. Joshua had been there for her in ways that went beyond what she expected. When she was coughing through the night, battling that relentless flu, he didn't just offer words of comfort. He stayed by her side, climbing into bed to nurse her, handing her tissues, rubbing her back, making sure she felt seen and cared for in a way that went straight to her heart. Every gentle touch, every moment of attentive care seemed like a validation of all the time, hope, and energy she had invested in him. The breakfast in bed he prepared the next morning only deepened the emotional intensity. As he carefully placed the plate of eggs, toast, and fresh fruit in front of her, she laughed, delighted and charmed by the small touches he added, even teasing her about trying Vegemite for the first time. She tried it and recoiled, but Joshua laughed with her, sharing in the awkwardness. That shared humor, that vulnerability made her feel close to him, almost like a safe space in a world that often demanded performance and perfection. For Elise, these moments were proof that Joshua was not just someone she had talked to online for months. He was alive, attentive, and, crucially, present. Her heart soared, and her trust, fragile but hopeful, felt validated. Yet, as comforting as these experiences were, small inconsistencies started to gnaw at her mind. The casual way he referred to his living arrangements, the vague stories about where he had been staying before she arrived, the way he laughed off certain questions as if brushing them aside, it all began to accumulate, forming a quiet but persistent hum of unease. The warmth and intimacy didn't erase these whispers of suspicion. If anything, it amplified them. Because when someone is physically attentive and emotionally charming, the mind starts to look for contradictions. Tiny cracks in the fade, signs that maybe all this sweetness isn't as straightforward as it seems. Every thoughtful gesture became a question. Is he genuinely caring? Or is this carefully timed charm meant to soften the impact of the secrets he hasn't shared? Long-distance relationships have a way of idealizing partners, turning imagined intimacy into a narrative we hold sacred. Elise had spent months building expectations in her mind. Late-night calls, shared hopes, promises of future closeness. And when she finally stepped into the real-life version of that relationship, she found that reality was both thrilling and disorienting. The very intimacy she had craved now carried a shadow of doubt. She was learning that knowing someone through a screen is only part of the story. The lived reality, the tactile closeness, the nuances of how a person moves, reacts, and prioritizes others all reveal a layer of truth that messages and calls cannot. Her heart said, yes, I want this connection, but her mind was already running scenarios, connecting dots that hadn't fully formed yet. Joshua's charm was a double-edged sword. It drew Elise in, making her laugh, feel safe, and even forget for a moment the complexity of her own emotions. But the same charm, the same attentiveness, made the hidden truth sting harder. How long had he been practicing this balance? Was every thoughtful gesture a spontaneous act of affection? Or had he learned to time these displays to maintain a careful image? Every time he smiled, every time he leaned in during conversation, every time he adjusted his tone to soothe her anxieties, it was impossible not to wonder if there was a method beneath the warmth. For a woman who had poured months into imagining this meeting, the contrast between chemistry and concealed truth was dizzying. almost intoxicating. Her emotions became a push and pull. On one hand, she was exhilarated by how much care and attention Joshua showed. On the other hand, every affectionate moment collided with the revelation that he had kept Nat in the background, living with her while Elise assumed he was independent. The chemistry made her doubt her doubts. The concern made her question the intimacy. She was caught in a swirl of adrenaline and uncertainty, a storm that refused to settle. Watching her navigate this, the audience is left suspended, caught between rooting for her to trust and wondering if Joshua's charm is a shield hiding manipulation or simply a human flaw in communication. Every laugh, every playful touch, every tender moment becomes a question mark. Is this the loving partner she hoped for? Or is there a strategy to soften the fallout of secrets still undiscovered? The audience can feel the tension as Elise teeters between heart and mind, desire and doubt, passion and suspicion. Every small smile he gives, every moment he leans in a little closer, is layered with dual meaning. Warmth on the surface, unknown motives underneath. And the story has just begun to peel back the layers. The emotional, psychological, and relational stakes are high, and each interaction carries weight beyond what is seen. The viewers are left wondering not only how Elise will respond, but what other truths lie hidden beneath the charm that has captivated her so completely. Would you trust a partner who looks perfect on the surface but hides crucial truths behind every thoughtful gesture? Elise's world tilted the moment Joshua casually mentioned that he had been staying at Nat's apartment. It wasn't a confession tucked into some dramatic moment, it was almost offhand, as if he expected it to be no big deal. But for Elise, it felt like a punch to the gut. Her mind raced, spinning scenarios she hadn't considered, twisting the warmth of the morning into an unsettling fog of doubt. The man she had trusted, the one who had made her feel safe and cared for, had been sharing his life with another woman, someone she hadn't met, someone who wasn't just a friend in passing, but a person with whom he had spent enough time to consider her space home. The shock hit first, sharp and immediate, leaving her struggling to process the discrepancy between the Joshua she knew and the one who lived another life just blocks away. Jealousy surged almost instantly. It wasn't the kind of jealousy that could be dismissed with a joke or a shrug. This was raw, primal, fueled by months of emotional investment and the sudden glaring realization that someone else had been a constant presence in his daily life. Elise's brain fired off questions faster than she could control them. Why didn't he tell me? How long has this been happening? Was she always there while I was imagining this perfect version of him? This independent, responsible man who only had eyes for me? Each question hit like a hammer, rattling the fragile foundation of trust she had built up over weeks of anticipation and hope. Emotional reasoning collided with suspicion. It wasn't just about jealousy, it was about boundaries and fairness. Living with another woman, even if it was platonic, created a scenario ripe for misinterpretation. Could he truly maintain clear boundaries, or was she seeing him at his most innocent while Nat's presence loomed in the background? Elise's mind, conditioned by past heartbreaks and the anxiety of long-distance relationships, jumped to the worst-case scenario. Maybe Joshua's dependence on Nat was more than friendship. Maybe he relied on her financially, emotionally, and practically in ways he hadn't disclosed. Each thought pulled Elise deeper into doubt, making her question everything she thought she knew about their connection. Her immediate reaction was a mixture of disbelief and confrontation. How could someone she trusted so implicitly with her heart have hidden something so significant? The feeling of betrayal was almost physical, a tightness in her chest that made it hard to breathe. She tried to force herself to think logically, to hear his explanation without judgment, but every word felt like it came from a version of Joshua she barely recognized. When he tried to clarify, to explain that it wasn't complicated and that Nat was a close friend in need, Elise's brain still refused to accept the simplicity. Context didn't erase the emotional impact. Trust, once shaken, does not settle easily, and she could feel the chasm opening between perception and reality, between what she had believed and what had been concealed. The psychological angle here is brutal. Long-distance relationships already demand an enormous leap of faith. When a partner's history or present circumstances remain partially obscured, that leap stretches to a breaking point. Elise's mind reeled through the months of conversations, the nights imagining a shared future, trying to reconcile all the tenderness she had felt with the sudden, undeniable fact that there had been secrets. The intimacy they shared, the laughter and the care suddenly became layered with doubt. Could she trust the gestures of warmth, the touches and thoughtful acts, knowing that part of his life had remained hidden? Or were these gestures sincere, even if they existed alongside undisclosed truth? Every interaction became a puzzle piece, and every piece raised more questions than it answered. Why hadn't he disclosed Nat's presence earlier? Was he intentionally keeping her in the dark, or had he genuinely thought it irrelevant? And for how long had this arrangement been going on? Elise had to navigate a minefield of emotional reasoning while trying not to lose the growing bond they had built. She wanted to believe him, but every instinct whispered caution. There was a danger in accepting surface-level explanations too quickly, especially when her gut was screaming that something fundamental had been omitted. The tension was electric, practically visible in the space between them. Joshua's calm demeanor, his gentle reassurances, and Elise's storm of emotions created a clash of realities. One person believed in platonic innocence, while the other wrestled with the implications of hidden intimacy. As they talked, the air thickened with unspoken questions, unsaid fears, and simmering jealousy. Elise's mind could not settle. She felt the need to demand clarity, to understand the true nature of Joshua's bond with Nat, and at the same time, her heart recoiled at the idea of confrontation. If you think this is the worst part, wait until you see what Elise finds out next. Even after the initial shock, the questions refused to stop. Elise began analyzing every interaction Joshua had mentioned with Nat, every story about his life before she arrived, trying to trace back where omissions occurred. Each answer he offered, no matter how genuine it sounded, seemed to open new doors of doubt. Was this a pattern of behavior? How would this affect their burgeoning intimacy? And most importantly, could she ever trust the gestures that had made her fall for him in the first place if his life had been partially concealed from her? The suspense wasn't just in the mystery of Nat, it was in the unraveling of Elise's certainty. Her faith in Joshua and the very foundation of their relationship. Elise's emotions reached a boiling point the moment she turned toward Joshua, eyes wide and jaw tight. The calm morning they had shared, the breakfast in bed, the tender touches, the whispered laughter, suddenly felt fragile, almost unreal. She needed answers. She had invested herself fully, imagining that Joshua's gestures were honest reflections of his feelings, yet now the foundation of trust seemed riddled with cracks. "Why didn't you tell me about Nat?" she asked, voice trembling, sharp with both hurt and disbelief. It wasn't just a question. It was an accusation, a plea, and a demand for truth all at once. The weight of her curiosity pressed on the room, making the air feel almost dense, electric with tension. She wanted to understand why someone she trusted so deeply had kept a significant part of his life hidden, and she needed clarity before the optimism she felt could survive. Joshua's first response was measured, almost rehearsed. It wasn't a big deal. "Nat and I are just friends," he said, tone calm, attempting to ease the rising storm. But calmness rarely cuts through suspicion, especially when trust has been shaken. Elise's eyebrows shot up. Just friends? After months of cultivating closeness, after his gestures of care, it felt impossible for her to reconcile that explanation with the reality she had just uncovered. Every instinct she had screamed that the situation was more complicated than he was letting on. She pressed further, leaning in slightly, urgency in her gaze. "Just friends? How long has this been going on? Why didn't you think it mattered to tell me?" Her words cut like a knife, precise and probing, demanding truth without room for evasion. Joshua tried to rationalize, explaining that the arrangement with Nat was temporary, that he had needed a place closer to work, that it had never felt like something Elise needed to know immediately. "I thought it was nothing important," he insisted. But Elise's mind didn't process the excuses as intended. Each rationale raised new questions. If it was truly trivial, why was it concealed until now? Why had she had to stumble onto this truth herself instead of hearing it directly from him? The dissonance between his calm intention and the emotional impact on her was palpable. She could see the gap between what he meant and how it landed. And the audience watching along could feel the same tension. The innocence of his reasoning clashing with the seismic weight of secrecy. Elise's jealousy and incredulity flared further when Joshua mentioned he had stayed at Nat's place multiple times. She felt blindsided by the simplicity of his defense. The nonchalance in the way he explained what to her seemed monumental. "So, you're telling me you've been living with another woman and it didn't even occur to you that I might need to know?" she asked, voice rising slightly with frustration. The contradiction between behavior and intention was brutal. Joshua's behavior suggested a deeper intimacy than he admitted, yet his intentions, he claimed, were pure and innocent. The clash left Elise unsure where to place her trust, creating a tension that crackled through the scene, making every pause, every glance, and every word feel loaded with unspoken implications. As the conversation continued, small inconsistencies began to emerge in Joshua's story. He mentioned moving in with Nat temporarily, then casually added that he had also stayed with his parents at times. There were brief pauses, subtle hesitations, shifts in phrasing that hinted at selective disclosure. To the audience, these were red flags, small cracks signaling that the full story had yet to be revealed. Each detail, no matter how minor, layered tension on top of tension, leaving viewers questioning what had been omitted and what might still be hidden. The suspense was relentless, creating a mental ping pong for the audience, drawing them deeper into the unfolding drama. Elise's emotional stakes were clear. She had invested herself physically and emotionally, believing Joshua was fully transparent, yet now, the certainty she relied on was crumbling. She felt vulnerable, exposed, and anxious, unsure whether her love had been reciprocated in the way she imagined. Joshua's attempts at justification, while reasonable in isolation, collided with her emotional reality, intensifying the disconnect between intention and perception. Every moment, every carefully chosen word seemed to push them further apart even as he tried to bridge the gap. The audience, aligned with Elise's perspective, could feel her frustration, her hurt, and the intensity of her internal questioning. At the same time, Joshua's rationalizations offered a counterpoint, creating layered drama that explored the tension between what people intend and what their actions communicate. This wasn't just a simple argument, it was a psychological battlefield where trust, perception, and behavior collided, leaving the audience hanging on every word, wondering how far Elise's suspicion would go, how Joshua would respond, and what revelations were still waiting to surface. The unresolved questions loomed large. Was Joshua truly innocent in his actions, or had his charm masked deeper omissions? Could Elise reconcile his behavior with her desire for honesty and transparency? The suspense didn't just exist in the conversation, it seeped into every glance, every hesitant response, keeping viewers locked in, unable to look away as the storm between trust and deception built toward its next explosive moment. Elise sat frozen for a moment, her hands gripping the edge of the chair as if it could anchor her amidst the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. Shock had morphed into something heavier, betrayal that stung sharper than she expected, a twisting knot of anger and confusion that made every memory of Joshua's tenderness suddenly feel suspect. Breakfast in bed, the way he had nursed her through coughing fits, even the gentle touches that had made her heart skip, all of it now came with a shadow. She wondered how much of that had been real affection, and how much had been calculated, a carefully constructed charm designed to lull her into trust while concealing key parts of his life. The feeling was dizzying. Many viewers might recognize that exact moment, the gut punch of realizing someone you trusted might not be fully honest. Jealousy flared almost instantly. It wasn't just about living arrangements, it was about intimacy, boundaries, and the invisible lines she assumed existed between him and other women. Seeing the name Nat pop up, imagining the moments they had shared, the comfort Joshua had given her, stirred a cocktail of fear and suspicion in Elise. Was she just another person in a long line of women being cared for while he maintained parallel bonds elsewhere? Her mind raced with scenarios, each one more dramatic than the last, and yet entirely believable in the context of her limited information. The audience, aligned with her perspective, could feel the tension rising, their curiosity heightening as they questioned what Joshua had really been hiding. Her emotions were layered and contradictory. Anger and disbelief vied with longing and attachment, creating a turbulent psychological state where she didn't know whether to confront him or retreat. She wanted clarity, yet feared the answers. Could Joshua's charm truly mask deceit, or was her reaction amplified by her insecurities and past experiences? Observationally, it was easy for viewers to ask if she was overreacting. But emotionally, her response was grounded in human instinct. When trust is breached, even partially, the mind instinctively seeks to understand, to protect itself from further harm. The fear of manipulation crept in quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, then louder with each passing moment. She wondered whether Joshua had engineered the timing of the revelation to maximize control, to ensure she was already emotionally invested before disclosing any inconvenient truth. The worry was natural. Trust is not built in a vacuum, and in long-distance or late discovery relationships, missing pieces of information can feel enormous. She questioned whether every gesture of kindness, every playful smile, and every intimate moment had been authentic or carefully staged to shape her perception. The audience was drawn into this mental tug of war, compelled to weigh intent against effect, instinct against reason. Elise's mind couldn't stop circling Nat's role. If Joshua had been living with her, what did that really mean? Were there boundaries, unspoken rules, or power dynamics she couldn't see? The worry that financial dependence could create leverage, that friendship could harbor subtle control, nudged her thoughts into overdrive. She voiced these fears aloud, hesitating but needing to externalize the swirling
I've been living with
questions.
Nat.
Is
I've
he
been
really
staying at
free
hers
to make
because she
choices?
lives a lot
Am I
closer to
being
work.
naive?
If it's
Her
so
self-doubt
platonic
layered
and
onto
you're
her
just friends,
suspicion,
why would
creating
you have to lie to
tension
me
the
about it and tell me you're living with your
audience
parents?
would feel as if they
think
were
that she has a
seated right
financial
across
hold
from
on
her,
you that's making
sharing
you feel
every
some
part
sort
of
of
her.
way.
The interplay between jealousy and empathy was complex. While some viewers
That
might
offends me.
initially side with Joshua, understanding that friendship and proximity don't automatically equate to betrayal, most could relate to Elise's protective instinct. Emotional reactions aren't always rational, and the human mind is wired to guard against potential relational threats. The script leveraged this perfectly, allowing the audience to question themselves as much as the characters. If you were in Elise's position, would you react differently, or would suspicion and fear have taken hold the same way? Open loops intensified with every passing minute. What would Joshua reveal next? Could Nat's presence become a flashpoint, escalating the conflict further? Each small hesitation, each carefully worded defense from Joshua teased the possibility that more secrets lurked beneath the surface. The narrative tension built incrementally, ensuring viewers couldn't look away, their minds racing through possibilities while empathy for Elise's turmoil deepened. Elise oscillated between confronting Joshua and analyzing herself. Was she projecting insecurities or detecting genuine deception? Each emotion had layers, betrayal triggered reflection, fear mingled with desire for connection, jealousy pushed her to question past decisions. The audience, drawn into these multi-dimensional emotional beats, remained glued to the unfolding drama. Every question she asked, every doubt she voiced, left the next beat unresolved, a meticulously placed hook pulling viewers into the next revelation. This emotional maelstrom wasn't just about trust, it was about vulnerability, perception, and the human instinct to protect oneself when the ground beneath feels unsteady. The audience could sense that Elise was not merely reacting, she was strategizing, testing boundaries, reading both his actions and his silences. Every gesture Joshua made now carried weight. Every subtle facial expression was scrutinized. Suspense didn't come from external threats, but from the psychological battlefield between them, a tension the viewers could feel in their own chest as they followed her journey. The stakes remained high. Elise's heart, her expectations, and her sense of safety hung in the balance. Questions loomed large, teasing the next twist, as if the next reveal could either shatter the fragile connection entirely or offer a chance for understanding. And the audience, emotionally tethered to Elise's reactions, sat at the edge of their seats, waiting, wondering, needing to know what came next. If you think Elise has seen the worst already, wait until the secrets start coming out and the real test of trust begins. Elise walked into the room, heart hammering, palms sweaty, every step echoing louder in her own head than it did in the quiet apartment. Joshua had mentioned Nat before, but nothing could prepare her for seeing the woman he'd been living with up close. The air was thick with anticipation, and the first glance between the two women crackled with tension. Elise's mind raced. Was Nat judging her already? Was she sizing her up, calculating, comparing? Every small gesture from Nat, the tilt of her head, the casual confidence in her stance, felt amplified, almost like a silent challenge. Elise could feel her pulse quicken. Joshua tried to ease the air, offering polite introductions, but Elise could barely hear his words over the storm of thoughts running in her mind. Years of trust, months of virtual affection, and days of in-person bonding were now suspended in a fragile balance. Elise's jealousy was subtle but sharp, flaring in sudden pangs as she watched Nat move around the room with a calm familiarity that contrasted starkly with Elise's own nervous energy. She tried to smile, tried to appear composed, but her hands betrayed her, fidgeting as she looked for footing in a situation she had never imagined herself facing so soon. Nat, for her part, seemed unfazed, friendly yet reserved, offering Elise a careful smile that didn't give away too much. Every word she spoke, every laugh she let slip, felt scrutinized, loaded with potential meaning. Elise wondered if there were inside jokes she hadn't been privy to, subtle histories that would make her feel like an outsider. The audience could sense the tension instantly. The awkward dance of social dynamics, the unspoken questions hanging in the air like a thick fog. How close were these two really? How much did Joshua's presence blur lines that should have been clear? Joshua's nervous energy didn't help. He wanted to mediate, to smooth over misunderstandings, but his attempts only reminded Elise of his dual life, of the hidden moments she hadn't been invited to witness until now. The room seemed smaller, the space between them charged, and every casual gesture, Nat brushing hair from her face, Joshua laughing at a memory she didn't share, felt like a test of Elise's composure. Her insecurities, normally manageable, now surged to the forefront, amplified by the stakes of seeing this friendship in person. Elise's mind spiraled with what ifs. What if Nat had influence over Joshua's decisions? What if the stories he told her about financial independence were exaggerated or skewed? What if every comforting act, every attentive gesture from Joshua had been calculated to hide the reality of his living situation? The audience, drawn into this internal monologue, felt the suspense tighten with every passing second. Each small pause, each hesitant smile, each exchanged glance was loaded with subtext that could unravel Elise's sense of trust. The awkwardness escalated as Nat began recounting her side of the story. She explained the circumstances that had led Joshua to stay at her apartment, a temporary arrangement born out of convenience and mutual support, nothing more. Her tone was calm, measured, and unassuming, but to Elise, it felt like a subtle assertion of influence. Every detail she provided was scrutinized through a lens of suspicion. Every casual mention of shared routines or jokes magnified in Elise's mind. The audience could sense the dramatic irony. They knew there was nothing sinister, yet the tension was palpable, driven entirely by perception, emotion, and the lingering shadow of withheld truths. Joshua, attempting to clarify, offered reassurances, emphasizing the innocence of his living situation. But the timing, the secrets revealed only after she had arrived, after they had shared intimacy, cast a long shadow. Elise's emotions oscillated between relief and renewed doubt. Was he really truthful now? Or was this another layer of charm meant to soothe her while keeping more details hidden? The psychological complexity here made for intense engagement. Viewers were left wondering not just about Elise and Joshua, but about human reactions to perceived betrayal, about how trust can be tested in a matter of moments. As the conversation continued, Elise tried to mask her unease with polite nods, careful smiles, and measured responses, but small cracks appeared. Her voice carried a subtle edge when she asked questions about the arrangement, boundaries, and routines. Nat, patient yet candid, answered, providing more clarity but also inadvertently fueling Elise's insecurities. The energy in the room fluctuated, a tension that ebbed and flowed like waves, unpredictable yet compelling. The stakes were higher than ever. A relationship built on trust was now navigating a minefield of perception, jealousy, and miscommunication. The audience felt the pressure alongside Elise, understanding that every action, every reaction, every carefully chosen word could tip the balance. There was no resolution yet, only a delicate, suspenseful negotiation of feelings, assumptions, and trust. Her gaze met Joshua's occasionally, seeking reassurance, seeking certainty, and finding only partial answers. Each moment heightened the emotional complexity of the situation, leaving the viewers hooked, invested, and eager to see how Elise would respond to this direct encounter with a hidden part of Joshua's life. Her reaction here could change everything between them. Elise left the initial meeting buzzing with a storm of thoughts she couldn't quiet. her mind replaying every word, every laugh, every gesture from Nat and Joshua. The more she thought, the heavier the feeling of unease became, like a shadow she couldn't shake. Her emotions were tangled, jealousy, betrayal, and confusion weaving together into a knot that refused to loosen. Joshua had painted Nat as nothing more than a friend, yet the details, the way he had stayed there, the laughter they shared, everything felt layered, as if there were meanings she wasn't seeing. Her instinct was immediate suspicion. Was Nat secretly pulling strings, having influence over him? Maybe even holding some financial leverage that Elise couldn't see yet? The thought alone made her stomach twist. Joshua, on his part, sensed the tension but misjudged its depth. He tried to explain, tried to reassure Elise that there was nothing manipulative about the arrangement, that Nat had been a friend in need and he was simply supporting her while she recovered from a rough patch. He spoke calmly, logically, painting a picture of harmless friendship, yet his timing, revealing these details only now, undermined every word. Elise's mind latched onto the pauses, the nuances in his voice, and suddenly everything felt suspect. Was this honesty or clever damage control? Could she trust him to be fully transparent after so many half-truths? Audience members could feel the tension, and many of them would understand Elise's perspective. Financial dependence often carries power dynamics, real or imagined. In her mind, every small inconsistency or omission became proof of a hidden agenda. Her emotional brain was working overtime, linking scenarios that might have been harmless, imagining worst-case outcomes. She asked herself the questions every viewer could relate to. Was this friendship really innocent? Or was Joshua being subtly influenced, bending his behavior to keep a roof over his head? Did her boyfriend's care, his attentiveness, his physical closeness mask a more complicated truth? And yet, there were counterpoints she couldn't ignore, however hard it was to admit them. Perhaps she was misreading the situation. Nat looked genuine, relaxed, and unbothered without any signs of scheming. Joshua had always been honest about his feelings when it mattered most, even if he had delayed certain revelations. Could her own insecurities, the lingering shadows of past relationships and betrayals, be coloring her perception? The audience could debate alongside her. Was Elise overreacting, or was this a natural response to the subtle signals she was receiving? Every question hung in the air, unresolved, teasing the next confrontation or revelation. As the day progressed, Elise tried to find clarity, asking Joshua for specifics about boundaries, living arrangements, and financial responsibilities. He answered carefully, but the more detail he gave, the more Elise's mind seemed to multiply the possibilities. Every piece of information sparked another round of internal dialogue. If he is honest now, why wait until after intimacy to reveal it? If Nat's role is purely friendship, why does she appear so comfortable in his apartment? The tension between perception and reality created a psychological maze that made each interaction feel heavier, more consequential. Her friends and even viewers could empathize. When trust feels threatened, every act of kindness can become suspect, and every explanation is scrutinized for hidden meanings. Elise's mind kept returning to that nagging thought. Was she being manipulated, or was this all an elaborate misunderstanding fueled by secrecy and miscommunication? The truth was somewhere in between, but uncertainty was what made the emotional stakes so high. The audience, feeling her internal debate, was compelled to keep watching, wanting resolution, wanting clarity, wanting to see if she would find evidence of deception or discover innocence hidden beneath the surface tension. Joshua's calm explanations, intended to ease her worries, instead sparked a flurry of new questions. Was he emotionally withholding more than he realized? How much did he share voluntarily, and how much had he strategically left out thinking it didn't matter? Each partial answer seemed to open another layer of mystery, feeding the drama and keeping viewers invested. In Elise's mind, trust and suspicion collided. She wanted to believe him, yet every detail, every hesitation, every omission kept her heart racing and her thoughts circling in doubt. Even as the room quieted, the unresolved tension lingered. The emotional pull of the unknown was magnetic, drawing both Elise and the audience deeper into the uncertainty. Was Joshua's honesty enough, or would these secrets, however innocent, continue to erode the foundation of their relationship? The stakes were no longer just emotional, They were existential for the bond Elise thought she understood. Every glance, every pause, every carefully chosen word could tip the scales further, heightening the suspense and teasing the layers of truth yet to be revealed. As the evening stretched on, Elise's mind refused to rest. She replayed Nat's words, Joshua's tone, her own feelings, and the subtle shifts in behavior she had noticed. The psychological push and pull was exhausting yet compelling. Viewers could feel the intensity, understanding that each revelation, each clarification, each carefully guarded detail was a thread in a larger web that had yet to fully unravel. Questions multiplied. What else had Joshua kept hidden? Was Nat's presence as innocent as she claimed? Could trust be rebuilt once doubt had rooted itself so deeply? The tension was relentless, and the audience remained captivated, hooked on each new word, each new glance, each tiny gesture that could hint at truth or deceit. Every word Joshua says now carries weight, because one slip could change everything Elise believes about him. Elise's patience had worn thin, replaced by a storm that demanded answers. The moment she faced Joshua, it was electric. Her eyes flashed with disbelief, hurt, and a sharp edge of accusation. She didn't start gently. There was no preamble, no softening of the blow. She went straight for the heart of it, asking why he had never told her about Nat. Why he had waited until now after intimacy to reveal what should have been obvious from the start. Her voice trembled at times, caught between anger and sadness, but it carried a weight that made it impossible for Joshua to ignore. He shifted uncomfortably, caught between defending himself and maintaining the careful version of honesty he had crafted. Joshua's responses were measured, almost rehearsed, insisting that Nat was a friend in need, that he had done nothing secretive or manipulative, and that their arrangement had been practical and innocent. Yet, each time he spoke, small cracks appeared. Hesitations, the subtle flinch when Elise pressed further, and the slight defensiveness that slipped through the veneer of calm. Elise caught them immediately, her instincts telling her there was more beneath the surface. She pushed, questioning boundaries, living arrangements, and the timing of revelation, each inquiry punctuated by her disbelief that he could think this would slide unnoticed. Even as she spoke, the audience could feel the tension. Physical chemistry between them lingered in the room. His attentiveness, the gestures of care, and the warmth they had shared weren't erased by suspicion, but it clashed violently with the sense of betrayal that now dominated the air. There was a strange push-pull at play. Moments where Elise's eyes softened for a second, acknowledging the connection they had, quickly replaced by sharp disbelief at what had been concealed. Every audience member could recognize it. The dissonance between desire and doubt, between love and suspicion, a tension that keeps viewers glued, hearts racing with every pause and glance. Joshua attempted to explain further, offering clarifications about Nat's situation, about why he hadn't thought it necessary to mention it sooner. He spoke of friendship, of helping someone in need, of loyalty and empathy, but his explanations carried a shadow of ambiguity. He chose his words carefully, yet the timing and context of his honesty raised more questions than answers. Elise's eyes narrowed, her brain was racing, weighing intentions against actions, trying to decipher the line between protective secrecy and potential manipulation. The conversation turned to finances and trust. Elise asked pointedly if any of Nat's circumstances had ever given her control over Joshua, if her living arrangement had influenced his decisions or behavior. Joshua denied it vehemently, yet the very question raised so firmly by Elise left a lingering tension. Could the power dynamics she suspected be real, or were they a product of her imagination, fueled by previous betrayals and natural jealousy? The audience felt the weight of the debate, sitting alongside Elise, questioning, evaluating, and forming their own opinions. Even as emotions ran high, there were moments of vulnerability. Joshua admitted he had delayed sharing the truth because he feared her reaction, feared losing the connection they had built from months of long-distance communication. That admission offered a glimpse of human frailty, someone trying to balance honesty with the risk of emotional fallout, but it also reinforced Elise's doubts. If trust had to be withheld to protect feelings, what else might remain unspoken? Each layer of revelation brought more suspense, making viewers lean in, unable to look away from the collision of care and deception. Physical gestures continued to clash with emotional reality. Joshua's attempts to comfort Elise, to reach out with a gentle touch or an affectionate glance, were met with tension. She pulled back at times, testing whether the warmth she felt could coexist with the betrayal she was processing. Each movement, each glance, each subtle shift in posture added layers to the drama, showing the raw complexity of human relationships. The audience understood that intimacy doesn't erase suspicion, and affection doesn't automatically restore trust. Every interaction became a test of honesty, patience, and emotional resilience. Elise's voice hardened as she laid out the full scope of her feelings: anger, hurt, confusion, disappointment. She recounted moments she had cherished, gestures that now seemed tainted by omission, and the emotional labor she had invested while Joshua kept crucial information from her. Joshua responded as best he could, sometimes logically, sometimes emotionally, but the tension never fully eased. Every explanation seemed incomplete, every reassurance shadowed by past omissions. The audience felt the suspense, wondering which side would prevail, the chemistry that had drawn them together or the cracks in trust threatening to tear them apart. By the end of this confrontation, nothing had been fully resolved. Elise's questions hung in the air, Joshua's defenses wavered, and the room was thick with unspoken doubt. Physical closeness remained, yet emotional distance had crept in, creating a volatile push-pull that kept viewers on edge. Every line of dialogue, every subtle inflection, every hesitant gesture suggested that the story was far from over, teasing the next revelation and keeping the audience fully invested in what would happen next. In this moment, every word, every glance, and every hesitation carries the power to either rebuild trust or shatter it completely. After the storm of confrontation, it's time to pause and really consider what's happening here. Elise is spinning, caught between love and suspicion, desire and doubt. Her mind is racing, replaying every moment she shared with Joshua, every gesture, every whispered word, trying to separate the warmth of connection from the sting of betrayal. It's easy to sit back and say she overreacted. But if you've ever invested yourself emotionally in someone, you know that trust isn't just a word, it's the currency of every decision, every glance, every late night conversation. When that currency is suddenly called into question, the emotional fallout is instant, intense, and deeply relatable. Viewers recognize themselves in Elise's panic because we've all been there. One small omission, one delayed truth, and suddenly the foundation feels shaky. Joshua, on the other hand, is navigating a different set of pressures. In his mind, he's helping a friend, doing what he believes is harmless and even noble. Yet, his choice to withhold critical information, his living situation, the true dynamics of his relationship with Nat, is exactly what escalates tension. The psychological truth here is clear. Behavior cannot be separated from context, and intention rarely matters as much as perception. Elise doesn't just see Joshua's actions, she interprets them through her own experience, fears, and insecurities. That's why even the most innocent explanation can sound like manipulation when trust is fragile. It's a cautionary tale for anyone in a high-stakes relationship. Honesty is not just courteous, it's essential. There's a fascinating interplay between chemistry and trust throughout this story. Physical intimacy can deepen bonds, create feelings of security, and make us feel invincible, yet it can also mask cracks in emotional transparency. The audience has watched Elise and Joshua share warmth, laughter, and desire, only to see it collide with suspicion and betrayal. This is a core human dynamic. Attraction and affection often cloud judgment, making it harder to see red flags until they're unavoidable. In high-stakes relationships where emotions run deep and stakes are elevated, even a small withheld truth can spiral into full-blown crisis. Every viewer can sense that tension, recognizing that these moments of doubt are often where real lessons about communication and boundaries emerge. Let's reflect on the role of miscommunication. Joshua likely believed he was doing the right thing, assuming that telling Elise about Nat was unnecessary or would complicate matters unnecessarily. Elise, however, experienced omission as betrayal. That misalignment, the difference between intention and reception, is what drives the narrative and fuels conflict. It's not just a story about jealousy, it's a story about how easily human relationships can fracture when information is incomplete. Small misunderstandings compound, suspicions grow, and suddenly what might have been a simple conversation becomes an emotional minefield. This is why clarity, transparency, and proactive honesty are non-negotiable if you want to avoid spiraling misunderstandings, especially in a long-distance or newly merged relationship where context and nuance are already in short supply. There's also an emotional nuance to consider. The way people process betrayal varies widely. Elise's reaction is immediate, visceral, and emotional, reflecting her personal history and attachment style. Joshua's response is more cognitive, measured, and rational, reflecting his perception of events. Neither reaction is inherently wrong, both are human. This dual perspective is crucial for viewers to understand because it highlights the tension between emotional perception and logical intention. Every relationship has this dance, but when secrets are involved, the steps become treacherous and unpredictable. This story also reminds us how external factors like friends, roommates, and financial dependence can amplify conflict. Elise's suspicions of Nat, her questioning of Joshua's judgment, and her concerns about hidden motives all emerge from layers of context that Joshua didn't fully disclose. Each of these elements builds upon the last, escalating minor uncertainties into a full emotional tempest. Relationships are rarely just two people in isolation. Social dynamics, shared history, and hidden pressures can complicate even the strongest connection. Finally, the audience learns a critical takeaway. Trust is fragile, and even small secrets can have outsized effects. When combined with jealousy, past experiences, and high emotional stakes, any omission, no matter how innocent, can spiral into conflict. Joshua and Elise's story illustrates this vividly. Transparency doesn't guarantee peace, but it significantly reduces the likelihood of spiraling misunderstandings and emotional collapse. Observing both perspectives, Elise's emotional intensity and Joshua's rationalization offers a roadmap for understanding and navigating relational conflict in real life. By the end of this, you'll see why one small secret can spiral out of control. By now, the tension is practically electric. Elise has been processing revelations that would shake anyone's sense of security in a relationship. Joshua's living arrangements, his delayed honesty, the hidden dynamics with Nat. Every glance, every word exchanged has been colored by uncertainty. For viewers, it's impossible not to feel the intensity of her emotional storm, betrayal, confusion, anger, and fear all swirling together. The story has laid bare a fundamental truth about relationships. The bigger the secret, the harder the fallout, and trust can vanish faster than anyone expects. Elise's struggle is universal. When someone you love keeps even small truths from you, it magnifies the unknowns, and suddenly every interaction becomes a test of judgment, perception, and instinct. Joshua, meanwhile, continues to navigate the aftermath. His attempts to clarify, to defend, to contextualize his choices show both his good intentions and his blind spot. The audience sees the subtle cracks in his story, the moments where charm and reassurance cannot fully mask the discomfort. That push-pull between intention and perception drives the suspense. Is he naive, careless, or deliberately evasive? Every viewer is left weighing the evidence themselves, questioning whether his behavior is forgivable or a sign of deeper relational mismanagement. This ambiguity keeps attention high because it's a tension people recognize in real life. Not every betrayal is black and white, and human behavior is rarely neat. The lingering question of Nat's role hangs over everything. Is she simply a supportive friend, a temporary refuge, or is there more to the relationship than Elise has been told? The narrative has carefully threaded the possibility of hidden motives while showing moments of vulnerability and sincerity from Nat. Her interactions with Elise are tense, awkward, and loaded with potential misinterpretation, which perfectly amplifies the drama. Social dynamics in romantic relationships often complicate emotional reactions, and this is the perfect example. Elise's jealousy is understandable even if it might be exaggerated, because the context is murky and her trust has already been shaken. For the audience, every smile, every sideways glance between Nat and Joshua becomes a potential clue, keeping engagement high and speculation alive. Even as the confrontation winds down, the story doesn't resolve neatly. There are no perfect reconciliations, no easy forgiveness, just a series of decisions, revelations, and emotional reactions that ripple outward. This is the beauty of high-stakes reality TV drama. It mirrors life's messy, unpredictable nature. Viewers can relate because they felt the frustration of partial truths, the sting of miscommunication, and the slow erosion of certainty in moments that matter most. Every choice Joshua makes, every emotional beat from Elise, and even the unspoken tension with Nat carries weight. That's why each minute of screen time feels loaded. Every gesture and glance has potential consequences that we can't ignore. And yet, the story cleverly leaves open threads, keeping the audience hooked. Questions about timing, transparency, and emotional honesty remain unanswered. What other skeletons, if any, are still waiting in Joshua's closet? How much of Nat's influence is real versus perceived? Can Elise rebuild trust, or will suspicion dominate their connection going forward? These unanswered questions create a natural forward momentum, compelling viewers to anticipate the next episode. It's this combination of emotional payoff and unresolved tension that keeps audiences coming back and fuels commentary, speculation, and engagement. If you thought this was wild, wait until you see what happens when new revelations shake everything between Joshua, Elise, and Nat in the next episode. The story isn't over, and the stakes have only been raised. Viewers are left perched on the edge of their seats, imagining the potential fallout and debating who is at fault, what choices will be made, and whether love will survive the tangled web of secrets. Every emotion has been stirred: shock, anger, empathy, frustration, and that's exactly why they stay invested, replaying scenes in their mind and speculating about what comes next. As the dust settles, it's clear this isn't just about a hidden roommate or a delayed confession. It's about trust under pressure, the fragility of emotional bonds, and the real consequences of miscommunication in relationships. The audience has seen a cascade of tension, an emotional roller coaster that blends attraction, betrayal, and curiosity into a highly relatable drama. TLC Drama Live has brought them inside this story, offering perspective, insight, and a front row seat to the human psychology behind every decision and reaction. By the end, viewers are left with a potent mix of suspense and emotional reflection. They're compelled to comment, share theories, and anticipate the next installment, while also thinking critically about trust, boundaries, and honesty in their own relationships. It's a perfect handoff that balances emotional payoff with unresolved questions, keeping engagement strong and curiosity alive. Don't miss what happens next, because every secret, every decision, and every reaction in this story could completely change the game for Elise and Joshua.